March 18th, 1925. Morning. Across the American Midwest, forecasters sit down at their desks and write the daily weather outlook for the region. The forecast they produce is unremarkable. Rain, strong shifting winds, possible severe local storms. It is the kind of forecast that causes farmers to glance at the sky and keep working. The kind that causes mothers to send their children to school without a second thought. By the end of that day, 695 people will be dead. And the forecasters who wrote that outlook didn't make a mistake. They didn't miss the data. They didn't fail to see what was coming. They were forbidden from telling the truth.
The deadliest tornado in U.S. history happened a century ago on March 18, 1925.
To understand what happened on March 18, 1925, you have to understand a decision made decades earlier by a man who believed he was protecting the public. And you have to understand what it costs when the people responsible for public safety decide that silence is safer than a warning. John Park Finley was 6 feet 3 inches tall, built like a soldier, and obsessed with tornadoes. He enlisted in the U.S. Army Signal Corps in 1877 and immediately began doing what no one in American meteorology had attempted before: building a systematic method to predict where tornadoes would strike. He recruited nearly 1,000 volunteer observers across the tornado-prone states, collected hundreds of storm reports, and identified patterns in the atmospheric conditions that preceded violent storms. He developed 15 specific rules for tornado forecasting. In 1885, tornadoes appeared 15 of the 19 times he predicted them. He published his findings in prize-winning essays and wrote the first book ever produced on the subject of tornadoes. His colleagues were impressed. His superiors were not. In 1885, the chief signal officer of the Army Signal Corps banned the word tornado from all forecasts, not because Finley's predictions were wrong, because they were right. And that was the problem. Business interests across Tornado Alley had complained directly to Congress that Finley's work was giving potential investors the idea that their region was prone to killer storms. And the government's own position, stated plainly in official reports, was this: it is believed that the harm done by such a prediction would eventually be greater than that which results from the tornado itself. The government was not arguing that tornado prediction was impossible. They were arguing that warning people was more dangerous than the tornado, that the panic caused by a forecast would kill more people than the storm. That sentence, written by General Adolphus Greely and entered into the official record in 1887, became United States government policy. Not for a year, not for a decade, for 60 years. Finley transferred back to military duties. His meteorological career was over. He would spend his final years lecturing on tornadoes in private and helping insurance companies assess storm risk. The knowledge he had built turned toward private use because the government had refused to allow it for public protection. He died in 1943 at the age of 89, 7 years before the ban he had fought against was finally lifted. He did not live to see a single official tornado warning issued to the American public. The ban was codified into Weather Bureau regulations. It was reaffirmed in 1905, reaffirmed in 1915, reaffirmed in 1934. And it was still active policy on the morning of March 18, 1925, when something was forming in the skies over southeastern Missouri. The atmospheric setup that morning was, by modern standards, catastrophic. A powerful low-pressure system was deepening over the Central Plains. The jet stream was positioned to provide maximum wind shear. Warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico was streaming northward, colliding with cold, dry air pushing down from Canada. The ingredients were not subtle. They were screaming. But in 1925, there were no satellites, no Doppler radar, no numerical weather models. There were surface observations, barometric pressure readings, and the judgment of forecasters who were legally prohibited from writing the one word that would have told people what was actually coming. At approximately 1 p.m., a tornado touches down in Shannon County, Missouri. What happens next is where this story becomes genuinely disturbing, because what happens next has never been fully resolved. The tornado moves northeast. It does not lift. It does not weaken. It accelerates. Within the first hour, it is moving at 62 miles per hour, faster than most tornadoes ever travel at any point in their existence. Its width expands to nearly a mile, and it stays on the ground continuously without interruption, crossing the entire state of Missouri and entering Illinois with the same ferocity it had when it first touched down. Modern meteorology has a specific problem with this. Long-track tornadoes, the kind that stay on the ground for more than a few dozen miles, are almost always revealed upon close analysis to be a family of successive tornadoes produced by the same supercell, with brief gaps between touchdowns too small to detect from the ground. A single tornado traveling 219 miles without lifting is, by current understanding of how tornadoes behave, almost physically implausible. In 2013, Dr. Charles Doswell III published the most comprehensive scientific reanalysis of the tornado's path ever conducted. His conclusion: at least 151 miles of the damage path were definitively continuous, with no detectable gap. The remaining portions could not be confirmed or denied. The storm that broke every rule of tornado behavior did so without leaving enough evidence for science to fully explain it, even a century later. Either the tri-state tornado was a single storm that violated everything we know about how tornadoes work, or our original measurements were wrong. Neither answer is comfortable. On the afternoon of March 18, 1925, the tornado was crossing Illinois at highway speed, and the towns in its path had no idea it was coming. The tornado enters Illinois and hits Gorham, a town of 500 people. More than half of its population is killed. Every building is either damaged or destroyed. It reaches Murfreesboro at approximately 2:35 p.m., moving at 73 miles per hour. Murfreesboro is a mid-sized city of 12,000 people. It has schools, churches, railroad shops, a hotel district, and a mobile and Ohio rail yard employing nearly 1,100 workers. The tornado arrives without warning. Not without warning because the forecasters failed to see it. Without warning because the word that would have described it was forbidden. 234 people die in Murfreesboro in the next few minutes, the single highest death count from a tornado impact on a single American city in recorded history. But the number doesn't capture what 234 deaths in a city of 12,000 actually looks like. It looks like the Longfellow grade school, where the walls collapse on the children inside. It looks like the railroad shops where workers are killed, many of them not by the tornado itself, but by the fires that ignite in the wreckage afterward, fed by ruptured gas lines and spread by winds that the severed water mains cannot fight. It looks like 40% of the entire city's buildings damaged or destroyed. It looks like a survivor being pulled alive from school rubble 2 days after the tornado passed. The tornado does not stop at Murfreesboro. It continues northeast, DeSoto, Illinois. The tornado arrives at 2:45 p.m., a churning black mass, moving at tremendous speed, nearly a mile and a half wide. It destroys 30% of the town. At the DeSoto school, 33 children are killed. More children die in a single school in a single tornado than in any other event in American history before or since. West Frankfort, Parrish, Crossville. The tornado crosses into Indiana. Griffin, Owensville, Princeton. It finally dissipates at approximately 4:30 p.m. near Petersburg, Indiana, 3.5 hours after it first touched down. When the counting is finished, 695 people are dead across Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. More than 2,000 are injured. Approximately 15,000 homes are destroyed. 57 schools across 3 states are damaged or destroyed. Approximately 1/3 of the tornado's victims are children. No photographs of the tornado itself were ever taken. No film exists. No one who saw it coming had time to do anything but run. The silence that surrounded the tri-state tornado was not the silence of ignorance, it was the silence of policy. And that distinction matters enormously because it means the deaths were not inevitable. They were the product of a choice. Made in 1885, entered into official policy in 1887, reaffirmed 3 times across the following decades, and never seriously challenged until the bodies were counted. The commercial pressure from Tornado Alley businessmen had reinforced the ban. The fear of public panic had sustained it. A politically connected meteorologist named Cleveland Abbey, known as the father of the Weather Bureau, had actively defended it in writing as recently as 1899, the year 117 people died in the Circus Day tornado, arguing there was no material advantage to be derived from any tornado prediction system, however perfect. The ban did not fall immediately after the tri-state tornado. It did not fall in the years that followed. It did not fall until 1950, 25 years after the deadliest tornado in American history demonstrated in the most brutal possible terms what the policy actually cost. And even then, it did not fall because of political courage or institutional reflection. It fell because two men were ordered to do the impossible and decided to try. March 20th, 1948, Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma. A tornado strikes the base without warning. It destroys aircraft, injures personnel, and causes $10 million in damage. The official inquiry concludes that the tornado was not forecastable given the present state of the art. Brigadier General Fred Borum reads that conclusion and refuses to accept it. He calls in the head of the base weather unit and his deputy. Their names are Major Ernest Fawbush and Captain Robert Miller. Fawbush is 33. Miller is 28. The general's question to them is not complicated. If you can forecast rain, why can't you forecast tornadoes? Both men know exactly what happened to John Park Finley when he asked the same question in 1882. Captain Miller would later describe his reaction to the general's order in terms that capture exactly what it felt like to stand at that moment in meteorological history. He said he wondered how he would manage as a civilian, perhaps as an elevator operator, because issuing a tornado forecast for a precise location seemed like exactly the kind of thing that would end a career. They spent 5 days analyzing historical data, identifying atmospheric patterns, building a methodology based in part on the work of Finley himself, the forecaster who had been banned from doing this 60 years earlier. On March 25, 1948, they noticed that the weather conditions developing over Oklahoma are almost identical to those of March 20th. In an afternoon meeting, they briefed the general. Borum asks one question: "Are you going to issue a tornado forecast?" Fawbush wrote it. Miller typed it and carried it across the building to base operations for dissemination. At 2:50 p.m. on March 25, 1948, the first official tornado forecast in American history was issued. At approximately 6 p.m. that evening, a tornado strikes Tinker Air Force Base. It touches down within the forecast area, within the forecast window. Aircraft that had been moved into hangars are safe. Personnel who had been warned are sheltered. 35 aircraft are destroyed by the storm. Not one person is injured. The warning system that exists today, the one that gives an average of 13 minutes of lead time before a tornado strikes, the one that has saved tens of thousands of lives in the decades since, begins on that afternoon. Not with a technological breakthrough, not with the invention of radar or satellites, with two men who were ordered to do what the entire government had declared impossible for 60 years, and who decided that the order was more important than the career risk. The modern U.S. tornado warning system is one of the most sophisticated in the world. Doppler radar detects rotation inside a thunderstorm before a tornado even forms. The Storm Prediction Center issues watches that reach millions of people in seconds. The average lead time today is 13 minutes. In 1925, it was 0. Not because prediction was impossible, not because the science didn't exist, because the government had decided in writing, in official policy, reaffirmed across 6 decades, that the warning was more dangerous than the storm. The tri-state tornado holds its record not because no storm since has been powerful enough to challenge it. It holds its record because the system that failed on March 18, 1925, was eventually replaced by one that works. 1/3 of the 695 people who died that afternoon were children. Many of them were in school. Their teachers looked out the window and saw a black sky and had no word for what was in it, because the word had been taken from them. 695 people is the permanent, unalterable measure of what it costs when the people responsible for public safety decide that silence is safer than the truth.